Alright guys, so yesterday we obviously talked about Joe Biden's State of the Union address that honestly I think he did relatively better than what I was expecting from him in. Although we're talking about relative to Joe Biden, and so I was sort of like half expecting him to just like stroke out in the middle of his speech. But regardless of whatever criticisms that I would have of it, the Republican response here is totally incomparable, okay? So here we have Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt, who's delivering their response to Biden's State of the Union. And this was genuinely one of the most unhinged speeches that I've ever witnessed in my entire life. What you guys are about to watch is basically an acting performance that would not fly in like a 5th grade play, okay? So let's just go ahead and jump into a couple different parts here and and just react as we go.
This is the United States of America. And it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable. From fentanyl poisonings to horrific murders, there are empty chairs tonight at kitchen tables just like this one because of President Biden's senseless border policies. Just think about Lake and Riley. In my neighboring state of Georgia, this beautiful 22-year-old nursing student went out on a jog one morning, but she never got the opportunity to return home. She was brutally murdered by one of the millions of illegal border crossers President Biden chose to release into our homeland. Y'all, as a mom, I can't quit thinking about this. I mean, this could have been my daughter. This could have been yours. And tonight, President Biden finally said her name. But he refused to take responsibility for his own actions. Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office. Reverse your policies. End this crisis and stop the suffering.
Okay, so we're gonna skip ahead to a different part here in a second, but I mean, listen, the over-the-top theatrics just make you look unhinged. They make you look ridiculous. I mean, I even saw Republicans throughout my entire Twitter feed who were like, who let this person give this speech, right? How did she record this entire speech and then nobody approved it and said, you look totally insane, right? The switching of the tone from smiling to borderline crying, the over-the-top theatrics, like, it just comes across as totally unhinged, right? But on top of that, on a substantive level, what are you talking about? Because the world that Republicans want to live in is one where, like, Joe Biden is this, neo-Marxist, complete open borders kind of president. He's not. He has been right-wing on immigration for his entire career. You can go all the way back to his Senate career decades ago. He was calling to build a border wall before Trump ever even remotely thought about getting into politics. Okay, this is the same guy who carried over many of the same border policies that the Trump administration had in place. This is a guy who right now is trying to push, and even mentioned this in his State of the Union address, he's trying to push an incredibly right-wing bill that he crafted with Republicans to address immigration that would like flood money and resources to Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. It would basically eliminate the ability for people to come in and claim asylum once you reach a certain threshold. An incredibly draconian right-wing bill that doesn't even include long-standing or long-term protections for undocumented immigrants that are here or any sort of pathway to citizenship on a reasonable timetable. It was a very right-wing bill, and Republicans rejected it because they want to run on it. Specifically, Trump wants to run on it for the 2024 election. Okay, so to characterize like that guy, Joe Biden, as being like this radical lefty, open borders kind of guy on immigration, it's utterly detached from reality. It's delusional. Okay, And she brings up this instance of Laken Riley where Biden, held up a pin that was given to him by Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was a horrible moment for Biden. He ends up referring to undocumented immigrants as illegal, So it was just like not a good look. He mispronounced her name in the speech as well. Terrible all around, okay? And obviously the story of Laken Riley is horrible, right? She was murdered, okay? She went out for a jog. But to try to spin that, to use that as a political weapon to just like bludgeon immigrants in general with is absurd. We know the data on this, guys. This is no secret. We've known it for a long time. I mean, I'll pull up just one study here, one example. But I mean, this is very consistent with all of these studies that I've seen, at least, on, immigrants who are documented immigrants as well as undocumented immigrants in terms of crime, right? Because that's the whole narrative is all of these people who are flooding across the border, they're all criminals and rapists and murderers and drug dealers, whatever the case may be. If you look at the actual data here, guys, I mean, listen, this was a study, total crime rates 2012 to 2018, and you break it down by the blue is U.S.-born citizens, the red is legal, so documented immigrants, and then the green is undocumented immigrants. Okay, so number one up here in every single category that they have, violent crime, property crime, drug violations, traffic violations, except for traffic, actually, but the most important ones here that Republicans would tend to care about, right? What is this up here? What is this down here? What is this? Oh, it's almost as if the data shows that U.S.-born citizens have a higher crime rate than not only, immigrants who are documented immigrants, but also undocumented immigrants. And by a massive margin here, by the way. I mean, you look at like drug violations, for example, U.S.-born citizens, and honestly, I'm, obviously against the drug war and many of these arrests just at a, fundamental level, but I mean, this is like 337 per 100,000 persons, and then undocumented immigrants is a third of that. I mean, same with property crime. This is all the way up at 165 per 100,000 persons for U.S.-born citizens, and then undocumented immigrants are down at 38. Same with violent crime. It's up here. It's more than twice as much of the rate of violent crime for U.S.-born citizens than it is for undocumented immigrants. I mean, you can get even more specific here with homicide and assault and robbery and sexual assault and burglary and theft. I mean, every single one of these undocumented immigrants commit less crime, not more, less crime than U.S.-born citizens. So the whole narrative here, it's just racist. I mean, I don't know how else to spin that. Now, it's one thing to say, okay, we need a more orderly border process. Yeah, absolutely. You need more judges that are down and tackling all of these cases so that it doesn't take months and years to be able to adjudicate different claims of asylum or anything like that. You need more resources. What you don't need is a useless border wall. What you don't need is to just dump a bunch of money into militarizing the border. Okay, you actually need to address the underlying reasons why so many people are fleeing many of the countries that, the United States has spent decades and decades and decades destabilizing and exploiting. I mean, that's one fundamental aspect of it, but another fundamental aspect of it is that immigrants are good for the country. Immigrants are just straight up, by really any metric you want to look at it, documented immigrants are good for the country. And so if you have an issue with undocumented immigrants, then the solution would be document them. We need more people in this country. There's no limitations on space. We're not running out of space. We just need it to be a more orderly process so that there's a real legal pathway to citizenship. And it grows the economy. It expands the economy. It creates jobs. It's good for, I think, personally, our culture, right? To have a diversity of different people from all corners of the planet. I mean, that's what this country was supposed to be built on, right? So it's really just like a racist sort of like dog whistle here to use the instance of Laken Riley to, put that on all immigrants who are showing up at the border as if they're all going to come in and commit a murder or something like that. It's inaccurate. It's not backed up by the data. And, I mean, it's just a classic fearmonger. It's a classic scare tactic to rile people up to, get them to come to your side and vote for you because of the chaos at the border, right? And again, it doesn't even track because it's not as if Joe Biden is not a right-wing draconian, border guy. He is. He absolutely is. And so now we skip forward to another portion of this speech here.
Life is getting more and more dangerous. And unfortunately, President Biden's weakness isn't just hurting families here at home. He is making us a punchline on the world stage. Look, where I'm from, your word is your bond. But for 3 years, the president has demonstrated that America's word doesn't mean what it used to. From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan to desperately pushing another dangerous deal with Iran. President Biden has failed. We've become a nation in retreat. And the enemies of freedom, they see an opportunity. Putin's brutal aggression in Europe has put our allies on the brink. Iran's terrorist proxies have slaughtered Israeli, Jews, and American citizens. They've targeted commercial shipping, and they've attacked our troops nearly 200 times since October, killing 3 US soldiers and 2 Navy SEALs. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party is undercutting America's workers. China is buying up our farmland, spying on our military installations, and spreading propaganda through the likes of TikTok. You see, the CCP knows that if it conquers the minds of our next generation, it conquers America.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot there. Number one, in terms of TikTok, I mean, I initially was kind of a TikTok hater. I use it a decent amount now. Mostly it's just like comedy videos. I mean, I'm somebody who's very invested in politics, and so you would think that the algorithm would be geared towards like trying to give me super like radical content, right? I mean, mine is just like mostly comedy stuff or like One Piece stuff or, other anime shit. And then there are political TikToks there, but a lot of them are from like mainstream sources. And a lot of the other ones are just like people being informative on Israel and Gaza or whatever the case may be. So I really don't know where this idea comes from that TikTok, compared to any other social media platform, is doing like more propaganda or influencing the minds of young people. Because if it wasn't TikTok, if you banned TikTok tomorrow, this kind of shit, the same kind of content is gonna still be on Instagram and Snapchat or whatever the fuck, Facebook and YouTube. I mean, this stuff is not, anything unique to TikTok, at least in my opinion, from my experience, right? So I think that the idea that like TikTok is just some like grand plot from the CCP to capture the minds of young people and turn them against the United States or so, it's just like, it's so hysterical, right? And ridiculous. Now on the other stuff that she was mentioning there, first off, abandoning our allies when she talks and the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Okay, we were in a pointless war for multiple decades in Afghanistan and Iraq. These wars led to absolutely nothing but destabilizing the region, killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and costing the lives, for that matter, of U.S. troops and also the U.S. taxpayers who had to shell out trillions of dollars for these pointless wars overseas, right? So what is your solution then? What should Biden have done? He should have just stayed there, right? We should have just kept staying in Afghanistan for another 20 years. Is that the solution here? As if that was going to get us anywhere? I mean, it's ridiculous. And then talking about Iran as well. Oh, Biden, he's trying to push forward with this crazy Iran deal, right? The Iran nuclear deal that was signed under Obama, that was working. Trump ripped it to shreds, okay? And then where are we at right now? Well, Biden, I mean, first off, he didn't really fight to get back into the nuclear deal as much as I would have wanted him to do. Didn't even come anywhere remotely close to that. But I mean, where are we at right now? Is Trump's policy of ripping up the Iran nuclear deal and assassinating Qasem Soleimani, a top Iranian general, almost sparking off a war with them, is that a better approach than diplomacy? Than trying to work out some sort of a long-standing deal through peace? I mean, what exactly is your proposal here, other than just going to war with Iran, right? And then on top of that, she brings up the Houthis, the attacks in the Red Sea. She brings up how U.S. servicemen have been killed in the Middle East. Number one, why do we still have U.S. servicemen in places like Iraq and Syria? Okay, why do we have them there? That's number one. Number two, when we had an actual downtick, almost a complete halting of attacks on U.S. service members in the Middle East since October 7th, it was during the temporary ceasefire deal that was in place back in November. You did that, and then all of these attacks basically stopped on a dime. The increase in the attacks on U.S. service members in the Middle East since October 7th has come because of U.S. support for Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And same with the attacks on the ships in the Red Sea. That's happening as a direct result of U.S. support for genocide in Gaza. If there was a ceasefire, If it was completely ended, then those attacks would stop. And so the solution there is to get a ceasefire for moral reasons, obviously, for humanitarian reasons, obviously, but also if you want those attacks to stop, then that would be step number one. And the ridiculous part about all of that is that Joe Biden has been bombing Yemen. Joe Biden has been basically using the U.S. military as a global police force to protect commercial shipping, even for ships that have nothing to do with the United States. So that's actually like he's going above and beyond and doing something that's illegal, which is getting us into a war with the Houthis without permission from Congress and doing these strikes. So he's going above and beyond to the point where he is doing something that's totally illegal and escalatory and bombing the Houthis instead of just trying to get a ceasefire in Gaza. So everything is just totally, not only is her proposals, or are her proposals totally ridiculous, but also it's detached from reality because it doesn't acknowledge that Biden basically agrees with you on a lot of this shit. I mean, same with Russia and Ukraine. Who's the guy who's trying to pass tens of billions of dollars in additional aid to Ukraine right now? It's Biden. Trump came out recently and was talking about how, you know, he wants NATO members to pay more or else we're going to like cut them off basically. I mean, he literally said the other day, or a couple of weeks ago at this point, that, you know, if they don't pay their dues, then Putin can do whatever the fuck he wants with NATO. But you're talking about Biden as if he's what, like a Putin puppet? Like what is the angle there on the Russia-Ukraine situation? As if Biden hasn't been dumping tens of billions of dollars into that war already. So I just there's no substance here. There's no substance at all. It's just over the top theatrics and you know, drama for the sake of it, and it comes across totally unhinged and absurd. So there you have it. The Republican response to Biden's State of the Union got absolutely terrible reviews. And I'll show you guys this before I show you that. The Senate Republicans on their Twitter account were tweeting out like quote cards with some of the stuff that she said with a picture of her looking normal here because they didn't want to actually post the clips from her speech. I mean, look at this on the right here. Tweeting out little like cards here instead of posting the videos because they know how stupid it looked. But also, like, you can compare what she sounded like normally versus what she sounded like in that speech. So let's do a little comparison here from AL.
The Republican response to the State of the Union. So tune in.
President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable.
And thank you to all the gentlemen behind me who continue to work diligently to actually secure our border. That's what the American people deserve. But unfortunately, Joe Biden refuses to give that to them.
Mr. President, enough is enough.
So, like, why didn't you just talk like that? I mean, again, like, was there nobody around her the whole time that was like, okay, you need to calm it down. You need to take it down about 10 notches right now for this to come across as, you know, like you're a normal functioning human being. But I mean, totally different than what she sounds like. Like here at this top, she looks like a normal person. She's smiling, she's happy, she's, you know, speaking at a normal tone of voice, and then just comparing that to that, just absolutely amazing. Now, before I end this video, I just want to show you guys one more thing, because here we had Mike Johnson responding after Biden's State of the Union. It's a very quick little clip here, but I thought it was pretty revelatory. So let's go ahead and listen to this.
That's kind of the unifying moment about this tradition, and we got none of that tonight. There was almost nothing that we could agree to. That's
okay. So, I mean, listen, you know, if you listen to Biden's entire speech and you couldn't find a single thing to agree with, then I don't really know what to tell you. You're insane. Okay, I am one of Biden's biggest critics. I spend a significant chunk of my time on this channel criticizing Biden's policies. I'm not afraid to call out Biden in the same way that I would Trump. But even I could look at his speech and I take issue with, you know, his immigration policy because it's too right wing, his, you know, Israel policy, even his Ukraine policy, right? I have many different issues with some of the stuff that Biden talked about last night. But he also talked about, you know, supporting unions and workers and bringing back domestic manufacturing, right? And lowering prescription drug costs and protecting abortion rights and IVF and things like that. So are you not in favor of any of those things? You're against all of that. There was not a single thing in the whole speech that you could say that you agreed with. Not on lowering prescription drug costs, not on abortion rights. Obviously, we know that from Mike Johnson, but not on any of those baseline kitchen table issues. I mean, even Katie Britt, in other portions of her speech that I didn't show you guys, she brings up stories of like, I met a guy at a gas station and he was a clerk there and he was having to take this job because he's, 70 something years old and he had to take it because it was choosing between, working and, being able to afford his prescription drugs. And she talked about these things about, okay, do you feel better off economically than you did a few years ago, right? So these are fair questions, but what is the Republican Party's agenda to address those questions, right? Because I have many issues with Biden not going far enough, but you guys are trying to sprint full speed in the opposite direction. Was there any Republican who was in favor of lowering prescription drug costs by taking on the pharmaceutical industry? I mean, I'm in favor of fully nationalizing Big Pharma. I don't think that there should be a profit motive in, healthcare in basically any way, shape, and form. But the Republican Party agenda is to slash programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, okay? And the Affordable Care Act broadly. And to give complete and total power to these, giant billion-dollar pharmaceutical and health insurance companies to just completely fuck over the American people and bankrupt the American people and withhold care and prescription drugs from the American people. So what is your plan to address these kitchen table issues? Is it to do another $2 trillion tax cut for billionaires and corporations? Is that the plan here, to do trickle-down economics? I mean, it seems like that's exactly what it is. So, I mean, it's just like kind of a lazy and delusional response when you bring up issues that do exist with the U.S. economy. Obviously, I mean, I talk about them all the time with wealth inequality and, a majority of the American people living paycheck to paycheck and, 3 people in this country having more wealth than the bottom half. So many different issues that we could talk about. Healthcare access, pharmaceutical drugs, their prices, and, so many different things we could talk about. But every single one of those issues, the Republican Party is not trying to address. They are not trying to improve on. And so it's just funny to see them over and over and over again bring up the flaws of the American economy when it's like, if you guys were in power, you would be actively making those things worse. Not that Democrats are doing a great job making them better, but you guys would be making them actively worse. So there you have it. Mike Johnson, Katie Britt, absolutely atrocious response to what I thought was like a pretty standard, boring State of the Union speech from Biden. But it's going to get interesting to see how both parties try to handle this basically like mid-off or this race to the bottom, while you have two incredibly weak candidates on either side and incredibly weak parties on either side, who are just basically in a competition to see who the American people despise less.